Man is sometimes extraordinarily passionately in love with suffering. That is a fact. That's a quote from Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, in which he describes a person who is given everything he needs and still chooses to be dissatisfied. We recognize the type, the constitutional complainer, the person for whom dissatisfaction is not a response to circumstance, it's a personality. They would complain in Egypt and they would complain in paradise. But there's another kind of complaint, subtler, more universal, the kind that isn't about personality at all, but about proximity. The complaint that rises up precisely when something good is within reach, when the door is about to open. Parshat Behaalochta gives us both. Welcome back to Torah in 7. I'm Bela Alidort, and here is the scene. The Israelites have left Sinai. They have the Mishkan, the cloud of God, and the manna. They are being led, protected, and fed. They are objectively the most cared-for people in human history. And what happens? The people were kimit onanim, like complainers in the ears of God, the Torah says. Notice that strange word that translates to like complainers. Abarbanel connects it to a root meaning legitimate complaint, but then adds the qualifier like, because they had no real grievance. It was a pretext. The Torah calls it libelous. There was nothing actually wrong. They just complained. And the Midrash notices something about the phrase, in the ears of God. The people weren't petitioning God. They weren't addressing him. They were complaining near him, loud enough to be overheard, careful enough not to be accountable. What the Midrash is describing in strikingly modern terms is passive aggression. They wanted a response from God, but they weren't willing to speak directly and honestly, because there is no grievance, there is no cause. These are like the people Dostoevsky describes, people for whom dissatisfaction is a way of being, not a response to anything real. And God's anger is immediate. A fire breaks out against them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. And this is only the beginning. 2 verses later, something different happens. The riffraff among them had a craving, the Torah says. Suddenly, the manna, the miraculous, perfect food, wasn't enough. They remember the fish they ate in Egypt. Free, they say, free fish. They speak with longing for the cucumbers, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Their souls, they say, are shriveled up by the manna. They crave meat. What is really going on here? They didn't actually eat fish in Egypt. They were slaves. Nothing was free. So what did they mean? The Midrash concludes that they weren't talking about fish at all. They were nostalgic for a time when they were free from the obligations of the commandments. Egypt, in their memory, had become a fantasy of zero responsibility. The complaint about food was a disguise. What they were really saying was, we don't want to grow up. We don't want the burden of becoming who we're supposed to become. And this is a different kind of complaint entirely, not constitutional dissatisfaction, but fear dressed up as grievance. And the timing tells you everything, because the complaints don't begin when things are going badly. They begin when things are going well, when the destination is finally within reach. The people have left Sinai. They have everything. They are standing at the threshold. And that may be the problem precisely, because there's something in human nature that resists arrival. The closer we get to what we've always wanted, the louder the inner voice that begins to doubt, to resist, to hesitate. Because arrival means accountability. It means the dream is becoming reality, and reality is always more demanding than the dream. So we reach for the onions, we build a case, we manufacture a grievance elaborate enough to justify turning back. We self-sabotage. The people weren't complaining because Egypt was better. They were complaining because they were about to enter the promised land. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the parsha gets really interesting. Moshe has a rear meltdown. He turns to God and says, did I conceive this people? Must I carry them like a nursemaid carries a child? Why have you done this to me? It's raw, it's emotional, and it's startling. We almost expect God to rebuke him, but he doesn't. God responds immediately, practically, and generously. Why? What's the difference between Moshe's complaint and the people's complaint? Well, Moshe directed his complaint to God honestly and in search of a solution. The people complained outward to no one in particular, with fiction seeking only delay. Moshe named his fear. The people buried theirs under onions and garlic. A complaint with an address can be called a prayer. A complaint without one is just noise, and eventually it becomes your identity. Soon, Moshe and the people get what they asked for. Moshe's burden is eased. God appoints 70 elders to share the load with him. And the people get their meat. The quail falls in staggering, suffocating abundance. And while the meat is still between their teeth, the Torah tells us, the plague begins. And they never make it to the promised land. They were standing at the door of everything that had been promised to them. And they manufactured a reason not to go through it. We do this too. When the opportunity looks too good or too demanding, we start looking for an exit. We build a case, we find a reason. The time isn't right, the conditions aren't right, maybe tomorrow, maybe never. This week's Parsha asks, are we talking ourselves out of our own destination? Does staying small feel safer than stepping through the door, even when everything we've always wanted is on the other side? This was Torah in 7 for Parshat Behaalochta. If you'd like to go deeper, there's a companion study guide with Hebrew terms, sources, and questions for further learning at torahin7.substack.com. And if you'd like to dedicate an episode in honor or memory of someone, you can do that too at torahin7.substack.com. Thank you for listening, and Shabbat Shalom.